I was so wrong about so many things when I first got into this hobby. Some of those mistakes cost me months of frustration. So today, I want to share 5 secrets I wish I had known sooner because they might just save your aquarium. Amano shrimp are one of the first algae eaters many of us add to our aquariums. They are incredible at keeping algae under control, so it can be really frustrating when you suddenly start losing them and you have no idea why. A lot of the time, the cause ends up being molting issues. Naturally, you start looking for answers, and almost everywhere you look, you'll find the same advice. Your GH is too low. Your shrimp don't have enough minerals to build a healthy shell. And that's definitely what I believe too. But there's one thing I didn't learn until much later. GH that's too high can cause the exact same problem. Shrimp need calcium and magnesium to build a new shell. But if the GH gets too high, that shell can become too hard for the shrimp to break out of during a molt. So before you start adding more minerals to the aquarium, test your GH first. I like to keep my tanks somewhere around 3 to 6 degree GH. A little higher than that is usually fine. But once you start getting up around 14 to 15, then high GH itself can become the problem. Keeping your Amano shrimp healthy is important because they are one of the best algae eaters you can have. If you suddenly start losing them, your aquarium loses one of its biggest defenses against algae. And if the conditions that allow the algae to grow are still there, things can get out of control surprisingly fast. Sometimes something as simple as checking your GH might be all it takes to prevent that. Take a look at these Luwija stems. From the top, they look amazing, but if I spread them apart a little, you'll see that the bottom 2 to 3 inches are mostly just bare stems with no leaves. When I first got into planted aquariums and this started happening to me, I thought it was something I needed to fix. So every time those lower stems lost their leaves, I would cut the tops off, throw away the bottoms, replant the tops, and even change my fertilizer routine to try and fix the problem. Then a few weeks later, the same thing would happen again. And every time I replanted those stems, they had to stop growing and put most of their energy into growing a new root system. During that time, they weren't using as many nutrients, and that left more nutrients in the water for algae to take advantage of. It took me a long time to realize that there was never anything wrong with those plants. This is simply how most stem plants grow. As they get taller, the top of the plant blocks more and more light from reaching the bottom. Those lower leaves stop receiving enough light to be worth keeping, so the plant moves the nutrients out of them and sends them to the new growth before those leaves eventually fall off. That's why the bottom 2 to 3 inches become bare. It's normal. This is why we use mid-ground plants. Because these plants grow shorter, we place them in front of the stem plants. That way they hide the bottom of the stems, which doesn't look very good. Now, if your stems are losing leaves halfway up the plant instead of just near the bottom, that's different. But if it's only those bottom couple of inches, that is completely normal and you have nothing to worry about. If you're finding this video valuable, remember to like and subscribe for more weekly videos to help you in your aquarium journey. In my last video, I explained that you don't need a huge canister filter to have a healthy aquarium, and I definitely stand by that. A small filter can provide all the biological filtration most planted aquariums need. But there's one situation where a larger filter can be a huge advantage when you are already dealing with an algae problem. A larger filter creates a much stronger intake, so it pulls suspended debris, loose algae, and fish waste out of the display much more efficiently. Instead of sitting across the substrate, that waste ends up trapped inside the filter. Now, it's important to understand that the waste is still inside your aquarium. The filter hasn't removed it, but by concentrating it inside the filter, instead of letting it spread throughout the tank, it slows down how quickly those nutrients become available when algae is actively growing. That gives you more time to figure out what's actually causing the algae before the situation gets worse. It also means you don't have to spend nearly as much time manually cleaning debris out of the aquarium, while you are working on the real problem. Just don't make the mistake of thinking the filter solved it. Eventually, all that trapped waste still has to be removed by cleaning the filter. A larger filter doesn't fix the cause of the algae, but it does give you more time to fix it yourself. Most people think pearling is simply a sign that their plants are healthy. And while that's true, it can also tell you something about your lighting. At the beginning of the day, the water still has plenty of room to hold more oxygen. So when your plants start photosynthesizing, the oxygen they produce dissolves into the water and you don't see any bubbles. It usually takes several hours before the water becomes saturated enough for those bubbles to finally stay on the leaves. That's when your plants begin to pearl. If your aquarium starts pearling within the first hour after the lights come on, there's a good chance your light intensity is too high. Your plants are working so hard that they are producing oxygen faster than the water can absorb it. And if they keep running at that speed all day, they can run out of carbon dioxide and nutrients long before the lights turn off. That's when algae often starts taking advantage. Personally, I like seeing my plants begin to pearl somewhere around the middle of the light cycle. It usually tells me they are getting enough light without being pushed too hard. There are a couple of exceptions though. Right after a water change, your plants might pearl almost immediately because the new water is already full of dissolved gases. And in aquariums with very strong flow, the bubbles might get swept away before they ever have a chance to collect on the leaves. So don't judge your lighting based on those situations. I think the biggest secret I can share with you is this. It's okay if your aquarium isn't amazing right from the beginning. I remember when I first got into this hobby, I wanted my very first aquarium to be perfect. I spent months watching YouTube videos, reading articles, and learning everything I could before I got started. I kept hearing experienced aquascapers say that their first aquarium was a mess, and I remember thinking, that won't happen to me. I thought if I planned enough and learned enough before I started, I could skip all those mistakes. But my first aquarium still had problems. Even after all that research, algae still showed up. Things didn't always go according to plan, and I quickly realized there were lessons I could only learn by actually doing it. Looking back now, I probably knew less than 2% of what I know today. This hobby has a way of teaching you things that no amount of research can. Every problem you solve gives you a little more experience, and before you realize it, you are looking back at challenges that used to seem impossible. So if you're just starting out and your aquarium isn't looking the way you hope, please don't get discouraged. Just keep working on it. Enjoy the process and let your aquarium teach you along the way. I promise you'll get there. One day you'll look back at your first aquarium and realize how much you've learned since then. And I really hope you stick with it long enough to experience that. If you have a secret that made a big difference in your own aquarium, share it down in the comments. I'd love to read it, and I'm sure everyone else would too.